kind attention, we are starting in 10 minutes. Please assemble to the auditorium quickly. Hello. Hello, hello. For your kind information, all of you please request to take your seats. We are going to start while.
Good afternoon again. With this session, we embark on an insightful journey into the realms of social impact and governance. I would like to invite Professor Gaurav Marathe from IIM Ranchi to kindly moderate the session and introduce the speakers.
Good afternoon all, and we're going to have next 1 hour we are going to spend on very critical, very urgent and very important topic, which is probably going to decide the future of humanity or universe in a way. It's about a relationship between, community, business, society, and then the role that education, corporate, and maybe governance play in making sure that we take this forward in positive way and in a worthy way. we have got three panelists who are extremely well versed in their own field, and probably all three of them having a very, very diverse background. It's going to be a beautiful synergy between three different experts. Let me invite them one by one and also introduce them to join this scholarly conversations that we are going to have. Our first esteemed speaker is Dr. Arun Kumar Rath. He's an eminent civil servant, author, distinguished professor, and a corporate advisor. He studied in the University of Delhi, University of Birmingham, and University of Bradford. Dr. Rath joined the Indian Administrative Services in 1973 and served as a Joint Secretary of Public Enterprises, Government of India, and Additional Secretary of Steel in the Government of India. He has been the board member for absolutely various prestigious organizations, and currently he is also chairman and visiting professor for a Center of Corporate Governance, CSR and Sustainability in Indian Institute of Management, Nagpur. With a warm heart, sir, I welcome you on a stage. Please give a round of applause to Dr. Arun Kumar Rath. Yeah. With great pleasure, I invite our second panelist, and he's also not very unfamiliar to Amranchi. He's our own family member. So Soumitra is a parent to our own student, and Soumitra is a partner at Indian Impact Sherpas, an advisory firm that work with corporate USWNIS social entrepreneurs to help and magnify their social impact. Prior to this, Soumitra was a founding CEO of Bridgespan India. Bridgespan India is an association of Ben & Co. is a global social impact advisory organization. And before that, moving into social sector, Soumitra has also 2 decades of experience in management consulting with Accenture and EY, where he held a key management position. He is also a chartered accountant and MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. So with a great pleasure, Soumitra, we welcome you on a panel. Thank you. Please. Yeah. Our third panelist is esteemed professor, Professor Kalyan Bhaskar. He is currently faculty in the strategy management area at XLRI Jamshedpur. He teaches and carries out research in the area of sustainability and public policy. On these topics, he has worked with and for government, international organizations, NGOs, and private sectors. Previously, he has been a faculty member at IIM Lucknow and an engineer officer at BPCL. Kalyan is a graduate electric engineer from NIT Bhopal and PhD fellow in public policy from IIM Ahmedabad. Please welcome Kalyan on a desk. Thank you. I think we are currently working in an era which is extremely, I would say, a poise right now. We all know the global challenges, whether those challenges are climate challenges, whether they are socio-economical challenges, whether they are challenges of very psychological level, meaning level challenges. And corporates have a great power, and therefore there comes a great responsibility that on this backdrop of all these challenges and world set the goal of all SDGs, you know, how we are all going to move forward together. And I would not take more time because we have this expert to speak on this topic. We have planned these sessions. We all 4 have discussed it a lot before. For last 10 days we are discussing and exchanging ideas over email. We had just a brief discussion, and I'm very sure this panel is going to really give you a lot many new thoughts. So without taking any time, we'll spend 15 minutes each in kind of pitching their perspective. All of them come from a very different background. So we'll have a policy perspective, we will have a corporate perspective, and then we'll also have a management education perspective. And then we will start getting into a conversations, hopefully very, very authentic and meaningful conversations. Feel free to engage with a panel in a way that, you know, triggers something really interesting discussions. So without taking time, sir, I would request to start this session with a warm welcome to Dr. Arun Kumar Rath. Thank you. I'm just giving you slide change.
switch on?
Yes, sir, we are switching.
Good afternoon and welcome. I would begin with a joke. Who is a professor? There are some students here. Anybody can say, who is a professor? I mean, you have your own definitions. I heard a beautiful joke. Professor is one who keeps on speaking even when the entire class is sleeping. And I'll add here, even if the entire class is empty, so he speaks. So since I'm a professor now, I'll speak on. Friends, we have come to a very critical issue which concerns each one of us, and I am Ranchi particularly. But I am Ranchi is placed in a location where this is very important. And I'm happy Professor Srivastava is not here, but I complimented him. I must compliment Professor Rabi Jain that he have chosen social impact as next year's theme. And 2024, IIM Ranchi is going to do event on social impact. Problem is that we always ignore whatever we do, it has a social impact. And we take for granted, society is taken for granted, but we don't realize that society can really kill us if we take society for granted too much. Friends, I have got about 10 minutes presentation. It will be very interesting. Just have a look at it. Now, first issue is that what is social impact? We must understand. Next year, Ranchi is going to host event on social impact. What is social impact? Then, what is governance? And what is good governance? We all are in governing positions. We decide. But are you sure that we are doing good governance? The two are different. And there the problem of social impact comes. Then, are corporations being responsible to society? Big question. Yes or no? Despite Indian law, I have my serious doubts. Having worked in companies, in the boards of a number of companies, Coal India, MCL, MRPL, SAIL, I've tried to put them on the social path, but very difficult. One man cannot do much. Then, what are the sustainable development challenges? What are challenges are there? We are all facing, each one of us are facing. ESG management, very briefly. Is governance committed to positive social impact? Are you sure we are not creating negative impact? Are you sure? We have to make sure. Then, the social contract, I'll come to the end. The theory of Rousseau. It is relevant today. What he said 3 centuries back is coming back today in a beautiful study. I'll come back to it. And then road ahead. I'll do all these things about 10 minutes time. I'll rush through, but you have ample chance to question me. Please don't accept what I say, because I will say many things which are not acceptable, unpleasant, but do challenge me and give alternate point of view. Now, social impact is impact on people and society. Whatever you do, how it is impacting society, anything you do, your action, your program, project, anything you do, your policy is affecting communities. There is social impact. And particularly corporations and business are affecting society by their decisions and their activities. It is beyond such, you may be doing a lot of profits. Doesn't mean that you are doing positive impact. It may be negative impact. Now, social impact strategy. So therefore, must have a strategy. Time has come to have a strategy to plan, measure the social change through your actions. Friends, so essentially, it must find out how your actions are affecting people and can you help them so that your actions are not having adverse effect on them, or their culture, their lifestyle, their human rights, their gender justice, all these things are they being affected badly? They are. Today, we don't realize that. And OECD has given certain measures of social impact, must keep on board that are we following such global guidelines of social impact? What is governance? Governance is decision making. Everyone having authority is deciding, whether director of an institute or a government or prime minister, president, they decide, chief ministers, secretaries, all are deciding. It's a decision-making process. But it may not be good governance. Because if I'm deciding and it has got a negative effect on society, it is not good governance. We govern and think we are governing well. It is not. What is good governance? Good governance is different from governance. We must understand that. If we understand that, we'll find that perhaps we are not doing good governance. Now, United Nations, to which India has agreed to these parameters. 6 parameters of good governance, 7 parameters of good governance. Consensus oriented. Your decisions must be consensus oriented. Are they? I doubt. They must be participatory. Are they? I doubt. Rule of law. Are you following rule of law always? Well, anybody to answer that. Are they effective, efficient? Anybody. Accountable. Who is accountable to whom? I am deciding. But am I accountable? Perhaps not. These all have negative consequences of society. Then transparent? No, I decide it. Who are you to question me? Transparency is an element of good governance. We don't do it. And responsive? No, we don't respond. We decide it. We don't bother about the consequences. Now, friends, again come to sustainable development. Now, one earth. The dew must not be toxic. Today, dew is toxic. In the morning when you get up, dew is toxic. So, are you leaving something for the future generation? Basic problem is that. Now, the 17 goals. I won't repeat. They know the 17 goals. I just flagging 17 goals. Again, talk of CSR. We talk of CSR, a lot of CSR. Now, but are you sure that we are doing CSR, not greenwashing? Now, these are the corporate governance principles. Are we following it? Good to see on paper. Is company doing good corporate governance? Perhaps not. Now, I'll come to the greenwashing part. In the name of CSR, what is happening is mostly greenwashing. It is all affecting society adversely. The social impact is negative. You think you are spending 2%, 3%. India has made a law. It has become worse because people are doing greenwashing. To 31st March is coming, so we must spend 2%. In the process, you are doing a lot of greenwashing. And don't do it. Society says, please don't do greenwashing. I don't need your help. Don't do cheating. Don't do greenwashing. Now, friends, we have made a law, but law sometimes is being used because I'm under compulsion to spend 2%. So I'll do greenwashing. It's happening. So ESG is also very important. The ESG is nothing but combining the three elements of yeah. Sorry, just a minute. Can you make it again, bigger one?
So if you go ahead, I think you have started again. Just move forward.
Okay, fine. I will come to the critical part and not run through slides. Well, who cares?
That was.
I don't know, something wrong. No.
Again, move forward.
Okay.
You want to have that 3
No.
circles, right? Should I take it back?
Yeah.
You're going
yeah.
forward. I can. Yeah.
Okay. Just a minute. Oh, it's all going back. Okay, you run it. I'll come to critical parts very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. That was, diagram was this.
Just a minute, I'll come. Okay.
You want to have that diagram?
No, diagram is over. Here, 5 minutes more. I'll end 3 minutes. Now, Joel Enkington gave the model of triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. Now, if you see that, the economic, social, and environmental aspect was balanced. Now, there's a problem of balancing. Today, economy is more powerful. That is controlling society and environment. Like, Coal India has to produce dirty coal because people need it. People need dirty energy. If you start reversing it, economies will be controlled by society and environment. The impact is different. Nobody wants it. Nobody would like it. But I think time has come when economies will be controlled by society and then reverse it. Then perhaps what will happen? Close down the thermal plants. No coal production. If you are serious about social impact or to protect the environment, but you can't do it. Can you think of a model which is faster to end the fossil fuel, faster to end our thermal plants, faster to end our coal production, and go for renewable energy more and more. Go for low methane, go for low carbon intensity. Now friends, problem of social impact. We comply, compliance culture. Have you done 2%? Yes, I have done 2%. I am a very responsible company because I have done 2%. It is not true. You are complying with certain laws. You are not bothering about social impact. Now, and expenditure is not important. Impact is important. Now, we are not doing social impact. Whatever you do, we are not bothered about social impact. Outcome is done. Greenwashing is more important. And sustainability initiatives are low. We are not bothered about sustainability. So problem is that, can we bring the clock back and think of the impact of society? And society and environment are one. Economy is the other one. So economy versus society and environment should be seen as the social contract. What happened? Everybody gives up rights to society. Because I will be having social protection. That was social contract theory. Doesn't happen. I have given my rights, but I don't get anything from society. Particularly the poor man, the disadvantaged. Therefore, social contract must come back. Last slide. Can you do last slide? Last slide, please. I'll wind up. Just last slide. Yeah. A new social contract in 21st century, go back to Rousseau days, come back. Society has taken your rights. What has it given? Particularly the people who are outside the domain, who are getting nothing. They say, we got nothing from society, nothing from the economy. We gave our rights, nothing from society. So therefore, they're questioning that. Social impact means giving right back to some people who have got nothing. Then profit for social good. When you want profit, it should be for social good. Then society and environment must decide economic considerations. And lastly, wealth creation must leave positive social impact on society and environment. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Arun. I think you have set up a right tone for remaining discussion. I think we all talk about SDGs, we talk about ESGs, and we are all aware of what every action of corporate is creating, what kind of a consequences. And Dr. Arun have made a very important point that seems like this all appear to be a greenwashing and not literally a green strategies. And second critical point he made, that while we may speak about three aspects of economy, society and environment, till the time economy is driving these things, it is not going to be help. So very strong points that Dr. Arun Rath have made, and I think it's the right time for Soumitra to join the discussion, and you being consulting various organizations to magnify their impact. A real question all audience have is that are corporate really doing it as just a compliance, or there is a real commitment and we can transform the system? Thank you.
Good evening. It's great to be at IIM Ranchi, and I want to thank firstly the management team at IIM Ranchi for holding this discussion, a very important one at times where the young audience, not people like me, we are eating away into their future, and I'll come to that. So it's a very important topic. Thanks, Professor Marathe, for kind of calling me here and giving me the opportunity. A few things. I mean, the first thing that hit me when I heard the topic, governance in social impact, right? And it's one of those things where, which you will see that all of us have taken a very different route to it. So Professor Marathe, I think you've been very, very smart. It's like, with your permission, I'll call us the three, wise men and the elephant. There are various ways of looking at this elephant, and I've looked at it from my perspective, right? So I think before starting, therefore, since Professor Rath has spoken and Kalyan will speak from a different perspective, I just wanted to share some small definitions from my side. I'm not an academic, so this may not stand the rigor of academia. But what's governance? And to me, governance is the process of directing and controlling an entity, right? So directing and controlling an entity. That entity could be your community, it could be a student body, it could be the government, or it could be corporate. In this case, since we are in a management institute, we'll talk about corporate governance, but some of the issues will apply, or the principles will apply all across. Second is, what is social impact? Again, I mean, I've kept the definition simple. So to me, social impact, and I'm looking at positive social impact. We've always seen, the negative social impact corporates have caused. Positive social impact, to my mind, is intentional acts of commission or omission. So doing things or not doing things that have significantly, one, sustainably impacted the societal inequities, injustices, or the environment. So anything you do or don't do that leads to a better outcomes on inequities, injustice, or environment, to me is social impact, right? So it's in that context, I speak. Professor Rath shared the 17 SDGs, so I don't want to necessarily get into that. But to your question, shall I call you Professor Marathe or Gaurav? Gaurav is fine with your permission. So Gaurav, you mentioned, right, the question was, are corporates really doing something about it? So I think let's first understand what they can do. There are a lot of things, in the 17 SDGs that you'll see are outside the remit of most corporates, but there are 5 or 6 that I'll call out. So responsible consumption and production is certainly one that corporates can play a good role. Reduced inequalities, I'm sure you've seen reports of corporates where what the CEO gets and what the lowest paid employee gets. So what's the inequity there within your corporation, and how do you deal with your suppliers, and therefore how do you create inequities in the society? That's the other one. Industry innovation infrastructure is one of them. Decent work and economic growth, of course. I mean, most of the economic growth is now being delivered by the corporate world, not only in India, but globally. Clean water and sanitation, I think this is more, I would say acts of omission that are leading to, what's happening to our water environment. Very, very critical. I mean, I've lived my life in Bombay, but I've spent a lot of time in this part of the world. In my consulting days, I was heading resources industries, which is metal mining and cement. So I've seen it at close quarters, Gaurav. And of course, gender, equality. So these 5, 6 at least, we could, as corporates, work. Now the question is, and I think you raised it, Professor Rath, why should we care about it as corporates, right? Now, undoubtedly to my mind, and push me, as Professor Rath said, this is an open house, you can challenge me, but I think undoubtedly capitalism has been the most long-lasting and successful philosophy of organizing a society compared to socialism, communism, and all that, which have not done too well. That doesn't mean it's been without a challenge, right? I'll highlight 2 challenges, and I'm sure this group can come up with 50. Firstly is the huge concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. So there was a study done between 1980 and 2020, which is 40 years period. All the G7 and G20 nations, the top 10%, the percentage of wealth, total wealth, held by the top 10%, grew by anywhere between 30 to 50%. To explain this, so if in a country in 1980, the top 10% held 30% of the wealth of that nation, in 2020, that grew by 50%, so it became 45%. In India, that number was 32% in the year 80. Any guesses what the number is in 2020, or what the percentage increase has been? So how many people think it's like less than 50% growth? And how many people think it's 75% and above? So clearly, it's just north of 75%. It's about 57% of that wealth, of India's wealth, is held by 10%. And if you do this math for 1%, top 1%, it's going to be even more dramatic, right? That's one. The second thing is there is a replenishment ratio in the, in the natural systems or of the planet, right? And we know we are consuming faster than, what we can replenish sustainably. So last year, in 7 months, around August 6th or 7th, is when we had consumed the year's resources, right? So as we stand today in December, we are living in borrowed times. We are actually consuming the resources that the young, people actually own. So from a longevity perspective, from a stewardship perspective, it's absolutely important that we do something about it, right? So I'll now move to the governance piece and see what governance can do or not do, right? So a few things just to remind ourselves. My definition of governance is directing and controlling. What I have seen in corporate boards, and I've been now working for 30 years, last 10, 15 years actually working with corporate boards. Most of the work is around compliance and therefore control, right? And that works in a period where it was business as usual, strategies were clear, right? To my mind, it doesn't work in the ESG space. In the ESG space, corporates and corporate boards have to focus on strategic direction giving rather than controlling. Because if there's nothing happening, as Professor Rath said, what are you controlling? So you need to have something in motion to control. And the strategic direction is, squarely missing. This is not my view alone. There is an INSEAD study along with BCG of European boards which almost found the same thing, that everyone was focusing on compliance and reporting and not really direction setting, which is the need of the hour. And my view on this is slightly, it may sound critical and maybe a little bit uncharitable to board members. I think this is happening for 2-3 reasons. One, the board members who are at least my age or more senior, they were bought in the environment where the businesses were exploitative and profit maximizing, right? So that's the world they come from, that's the experience they have. Secondly, independent directors are either lawyers, accountants, and I am an accountant myself, so nothing against accountants, and or bankers. So very limited, kind of diversity of experience that they bring. And thirdly, regulation is changing, very, very rapidly. So most boards are not able to put time on, on the strategy side. So what should we do? I propose 7 areas where the board can actually play a role, right? And as Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. So the first thing I suggest is the board should rewire themselves, right? And why do I say that? As I mentioned, right, board's focus earlier was short-term shareholder value maximization, which has led us to this problem. The experience has been limited, right, to that area, and they don't necessarily have the perspective. They're fine people, they've earned their laurels, they've done very well, but things have changed, right? So what do we do, right? I mean, to rewire the board, we need to do 2-3 things. Firstly, the board needs to keep the ego aside, unlearn and relearn. Secondly, increase the diversity, right, and need to allocate more time in the board meetings on the ESG related stuff. Secondly, creating a case for change. So Professor Marathi is the OB professor. He knows, how things work. Doing strategy is easy. Changing people and people's behavior is very difficult. I learned it the hard way. For students here, I would say pay attention to your OB classes. In IMA, I thought, quant was the most important and marketing and finance. I didn't pay attention to OB, so I learned it the hard way. But anyway, I mean, how do you bring about change? I think there are 2 ways of doing it. One is creating a burning platform. What a burning platform means is putting out there that if you don't change, what will happen? So bringing about the urgency and the and the importance of change. So it is urgent, it is important, we need to do it now. And you can go online and check the story of burning platform. It's actually an incident that happened in North Sea where a fire happened and most of the sailors stayed on the rig hoping that they would be rescued. Some thought that instead of a certain death, jumping in the cold waters of North Atlantic where you can die from hypothermia in 30 minutes was the better solution. So at least a risky chance of success and 100% failure, and they survived, right? So one is that. 2 is, I think, so creating that, and the board should also share the success stories, right? And there are 2 studies, one by NYU Stern, which has looked at, as a meta study, it's looked at 1,000 studies which were done. And out of the 1,000 studies, 58 proved comprehensively, 58%, that ESG and profits go hand in hand. 34 were ambivalent because some companies had a growth, some companies didn't or were neutral, and only 8% said there was a negative, correlation, right? And there is a similar studies in India also, right? So I think, first learn, unlearn yourself, rewire yourself, create the need for the change, engage stakeholders, right? I mean, today when we are saying that, when you have to move from shareholder profit and value maximization to the societal value maximization, our boards, besides investors and maybe in some cases customers, they have not actually gone out and met the society, the employees, the NGOs, right? And I know a company which does that very well. So their CSR committee of the board actually has, regularly interactions with NGOs, with local communities, and with academia. And some of these conversations, because local communities are involved, in board rooms are in Hindi and Odia and, and a combination of that, right? So I think, going out, speaking to the external stakeholders will help. Fourth, I would say setting vision and aspirations, right? So normally, goals for sales and all are set by CEOs. I think in this case, the vision and aspiration for change has to be set by the, the board. And I think, the reason is there are the ESG and the 17 SDGs which, which were shared. They are so vast that, you need to focus on 1 or 2 things, right, that you will focus on. So if you're a mining company, you can say, I'll become, or you're Pepsi-Cola, I'll become water neutral, right, or whatever. So I think, identifying what are the goals and setting clear targets, is important. I would say then guiding ESG has to become, ESG strategy can't be a standalone strategy. You don't do customer strategy, you do business strategy. So how do you inculcate and, ESG into your business models, right? Again, doing strategy is the work of the, of the CEO, but the boards can ask 4 or 5 questions as follows. Do we have a sustainability plan? What percentage of our sales have come from sustainable products? Is that increasing? How are we leveraging the latest changes in rebuilding our supply chains, right? Do we have the talent to lead us into the next, into the next era? Lastly, fostering culture and of sustainability, purpose, and accountability. So Peter Drucker, who most of you would have heard, famously said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can have the best strategy, but if you don't have the right culture, the strategy is not going to yield results. So how do you create culture? I think there are 2 or 3 things in terms of creating culture that the boards could do. One is executive compensation. Today, executives and CEOs and the board themselves are compensated on short-term profits, and therefore they work towards that. There's a study on, I think, 100-odd companies in the MSCI Emerging Index from India. Only 8% of them have executive compensation that is related to ESG goals, compared to a global average of 25%. So if you're compensating people for short-term goals, you will get short-term results. The other area boards can work on is setting the tone from the top, sharing stories and symbols. So if you are in front of CNBC, are you talking about your sales growth, or are you talking about ESG, achievements? Rituals and routines. I've seen, it may be a small thing, but I've seen canteens at certain very large organizations where they say how much water has been saved in that day, and how much food has been wasted, right? And how we're doing on that, right? So I think all these, as you see, 6 are in the area, in my mind, of direction setting. The last one is, of course, measurement, controls, and oversight, where I'll say, be transparent, publish your reports, don't greenwash, right? So with that, I'll end. To summarize, governance has an important role to play in social. Unlike other areas of business, the role, I think, is more direction setting than controlling. But I see green shoots, and I see some companies moving in that direction. So I'm optimistic about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Soumitra, for this very interesting perspective from corporate side. I think Dr. Arun set the tone that, we are greenwashing and probably environment need to drive the entire thing. Now, against that idealism where we replace environment as a first driver compared to economy, I think, Soumitra, you presented what is exactly happening right now. And we would say that a corporate is successful at least on 6 things which are not, we will say it's a good start to have a responsible production, consumption, reducing inequalities and industry innovations and decent work and clean water. That focus is important. Having said that, you presented a beautiful idea that how capitalism being useful, there is a concentration of wealth and repletion ratio still a big concerns. I really enjoyed the points that how we can change this by changing the board structure, bringing diversity and a kind of a process perspective. Now that set the right tone for Kalyan to join the discussion that how we are going to create these future leaders or managers or current executives in terms of shifting from education of compliance to education of commitment. And I think after you present your point, I think panel, I'm very sure there are some real questions out there waiting for panelists to participate. Thank you. Yeah.
Good evening all. Before this session began, I was joking to Gaurav that put me at the last, because then I can start and end my conversation by saying whatever was to be said has already been said by 2, and then I can simply end there. But because Soumitra mentioned about 3 wise men and elephant, so 3 people looking at the elephant from the different lens, and 2 people have shared their experience of looking at the elephant, let me share my experience. And my experience is much less trivial compared to their profound experience. In fact, when I was looking at the profiles of them, I have spent probably as much time on earth as much they have spent time working on these topics. So my experience will be pretty limited with whatever I've seen around me, what I've seen at XLRI, at IIM Lucknow, where I've been associated. So I'll share with that. But before I do that, let me actually really applaud the organizers and Gaurav for having this topic here. And for you to also appreciate that in a decision science conference, to have a session on social impact and governance, organizers would have thought something to have a topic like this. And imagine if we were meeting 30 years back, 1993, if IIM Ranchi existed then, or maybe 2003, would we have a topic or a panel discussion on social impact? What do you think? Probably not. Probably not, because this term on social impact and its relevance was probably not felt as much 30 years back, 20 years back. And what we realize, that world we live in has changed profoundly. In our lifestyles, it has changed profoundly. For example, if you have seen the movie Django Unchained, it talked about slavery in US at a point of time. And today, slavery is gone. We have modern slavery, corporate come for that, but the traditional slavery, that thing has gone. The whole issue around gender, having multiple gender identities, the whole talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI. So all these topics or these nuances were not recognized and acknowledged 20, 30, 40 years back. And that time around has changed. Some of you would be hearing about what is happening about Israel-Palestine, the conflict, the war in US universities campus. And just a couple of weeks back, I think the presidents of 3 MITs, Harvard and Pennsylvania, University of Pennsylvania, were called for some, session in the US Congress. And then they made a point in which after one of them had to resign. If I were to ask you, can you go outside and get Fair and Lovely for me? Will you be able to go and get a Fair and Lovely anywhere in Ranchi? Hello, Fair and Lovely, Hindustan Unilever flagship product, market leader for 50 years. Can you get Fair and Lovely in the market today? No, because the word fair has gone, replaced with Glow and Lovely. The product formulation remains the same, ingredients remain the same, manufacturing process remains the same, but Fair and Lovely does not say it will help you make Gora in 2 weeks, or that yardstick it used to give you, that strip, it does not give you that. And if you were to look what triggered Hindustan Unilever to change the name, and you would root it to Black Lives Matter. 3 years back, that protest that started, and that's the world we live in today. In fact, if we look even around Morris, talk of the largest asset manager company in the world, BlackRock. 2016-2017, people were asking after Donald Trump became the president, what does BlackRock has to do on racial division or racial inequity in US? Or what does BlackRock have to do with gun violence in the US? Because BlackRock had a major investment, was one of the major investors in gun companies. And BlackRock said, it is not my duty to take care of all of this. Politics should take care of this. I, as an investor, will not take care of this. This was BlackRock saying in 2016-17. Today, if you go to BlackRock website, and you will see a stark change in their stance on these topics last 3 years. BlackRock now has a net zero goal. And it is using shareholder activism to drive that agenda across the portfolio companies where it manages, including in India, including in SBI. And BlackRock was forcing SBI to drop holdings in Adani Enterprises because it was developing a coal project in Australia. So the world we live in has changed a lot, and not just on environment front, but even on issues like racial tension or colorism. And that world is changed. Talk about the context that we live in. IIM Ranchi and XLRI, both are in Jharkhand, the second poorest state in India, surrounded by neighboring state of Bihar, the poorest state in India, surrounded by Chhattisgarh, the 7th poorest state in India, Odisha, the 8th poorest state in India, and Uttar Pradesh, the 4th poorest state in India. So the area where we are located, where you are studying or where you are right now currently, is among the poorest state in India. Where, for example, if I were to talk about Jharkhand, more than 40% of Jharkhand citizens are multidimensionally poor. This is not a private study that has been done. This is a study commissioned by Niti Aayog that tabled its report a couple of months back. And in that context, if we talk about social impact to our future managers, the relevance becomes even more stark. That if we are producing managers, what is the role of a business school or a management in school for that? So what is driving all of this? In 20 years, what is driving all of this? So there's obviously a lot of it coming from the government. Some of you might have heard of a disclosure called BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting Disclosures, which was mandated for top 1,000 companies in India this year. It requires companies to disclose on 100 plus topics, 107 if I am remembering it correctly, on topics like what are you doing on diversity, equity, inclusion? What percentage of your workforce comes from the disadvantaged communities or from local communities? What much percentage of your sourcing is from local communities? What are you doing on waste management? What are you doing on circular economy, on extended producer responsibility? Disclosures, perhaps topics on which companies might not have an internal system and processes. But today they have to have it and then disclose it. And then some NGO, some shareholder, some government can pull up a company based on that disclosure. So there is a lot of push coming from the government. There is a lot of push also coming from some visionary leaders. For example, Tata's, we talk about Wipro, Azim Premji. So corporate philanthropic trust, many of which probably skip management institutes for campus placements because they believe the students here are probably not geared to talk about impact investing. And Samita would be dealing with a lot of them. So sometimes visionary leaders' internal drive can force a company to go for this. Or sometimes it's a peer pressure. Because now my peer is doing it, my contemporary is doing it, I can't be seen as being left out. So that peer pressure, that market pressure is also driving a companies to do a lot of all of this. And faced with all these three drivers, companies are reluctantly, not reluctantly, willingly, unwillingly forced to act on topics which talk about social impact and environmental impact. If we come to in the context of business school settings, what it is driving places like XLRI, IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore, IIM Ranchi to start talking about these things. Now a lot of these institutes crave rankings, FT rankings, Financial Times rankings. In Financial Times rankings, before coming to the session, I looked at the ranking parameters. 18% of your ranking comes from your effort as an institute to talk about carbon footprint, net zero, ESG, diversity in faculty, diversity in students. Before coming here in I got a call from the rankings office in XLRI 2 days back. Sir, how much hour do we devote to ESG teaching? And I said, why are you asking for that information? Sir, we have to fill in that data for FT and we are looking for data for last 3 years. We can't submit data what we submitted 3 years back. Sir, do we have anything on net zero goal? FT is asking a management institute to go for that. Similarly, talk about accreditation agencies like ASESB. ASESB, one of the 9 parameters, one of the 9 dimensions is your societal impact, which is again putting it on the onus on the management institute to start talking about that. So that's one part, the ranking pressure. The other part that is perhaps the stakeholder demands. I have known in institutes in India where women student percentage has gone up because the recruiters are demanding we need more women because there is an internal pressure from the companies to have more diversity in their workforce. Sometimes it is coming from boards setting the agenda for the colleges and colleges then acting on that. Sometimes it is coming from students themselves. Why don't we have a committee on that perhaps? So those stakeholder demands is forcing institute to work on that. Now those from IIM Ranchi would know that IIM Ranchi is in the process of starting something on rural immersion for your students. Now I am in charge of rural immersion for XLRI Jamshedpur. And XLRI has been doing it for last many years, about 15 plus years. We have been doing it with Tata Steel Foundation since last year. And I will want to share an anecdotal evidence for what happened last year. So we send our students in batches to villages in Chaibasa, West Singhbhum district. And one of the students was engaging in a conversation with a farmer and saying, what do you do with your produce? And that farmer had a very small limited hand and the farmer said, this paddy we save it for next year. And the student was perplexed. But don't you want to develop? Why don't you sell it out in the market? And the farmer said, no, we want to save it for next year because we don't know what the monsoons or the rainfall will be next year. And the student then said, but don't you want to develop? Don't you want a flat screen TV? And then that student came to me and said, sir, inki problem kya hai? Why don't they want a TV? Why don't they want to sell it in the part? So the notion of development to that student perhaps meant that if you have to develop, you need to crave material desires. You need to have going for smart televisions. And tomorrow if the same management institute produces this student and he goes on to, let's say, work for some other firm, his whole idea of development would be this unidimensional idea of development. So through this rural immersion, the intent of the institute, at least those of us who plan for this rural immersion, is can we sensitize our students to the realities of India? And can it widen their perspective? This is a program level intervention. You can also have pedagogical level intervention. For example, having a class in the classroom. Can you go outside and have a classroom? At IIM Ahmedabad, I don't know whether Swamit, your time, we used to have a course like Shodh Yatra, where the idea was you go on a trip to some of these maybe remote places. You go for a trip for a week, keep on discussing, and the course that gets over in a week. And there were similar other courses which forced the students to go outside the classroom mode, the typical lecture mode, the classroom mode, and to widen the thought perspective. So those interventions are also being done by management institutes. Now you also have student-level initiatives. I know in XLRI we have a now student club called Peace for promoting environment and sustainability related topics. This did not come from a college. This did not come from faculty members. This came directly from the students. Because the students that we are getting in places, the top places like IIM Ranchi, they are students who are coming out from a school where they were exposed to topics like environmental studies. Because CBSE and ICSE have introduced this as a curriculum few years back. And now those students, when they come to places like this, are asking us tough questions. What is the institute doing on all of this? And if they continue to ask those tough questions when they join organizations, that change is bound to happen. And those are changes that we are seeing in the institutes, and that many of you will be exposed to that. And I think I would want to end my thought on the elephant part by talking about a study which Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, had cited as one of the reasons why they are pushing for this was Deloitte had carried out a study in US around 2019, 2020, asking survey amongst the youth of US, what do the youth of US think should be the role of companies? Second was generating profits. First was creating a better society. So if that expectations, that people are expecting that from the corporations, that social impact relevance will only go further in time. So with this, I bring my perspective from the elephant to an end here. Thank you.
Can you on switching the mics? It's not working. Can you switch? So, thank you, Kalyan. I think we have set the tone well. So starting from the backdrop of greenwashing and probably economy driving environment is not going to help, and making a very critical perspective. And then Soumitra presenting that corporate are doing their work, they are moving towards it. Capitalism is the one philosophy which has contributed with its own limitations, and we need a structural changes in board, we need a kind of a thought process changes. And now Kalyan bringing and presenting how the education of compliance, whether it is from various ranking institutes or various things, is also kind of imbibing the education of commitment, and how various future managers are coming on with their own ways of looking at things, and how discourses are kind of changing probably the perspectives and the philosophies of future manager. I just set the tone, and I would open the forum now. We have 15 minutes in our hand. So instead of I kind of spending time, I would request there are esteemed guests and who have spent their time in thinking on these issues. So let's open the forum if anybody has some questions going on. Yeah. So here is we have. So can you just share the mic, please?
First of all, I thank the panel for a wonderful discussion. My question is for any one of the panelists over here. So the question is regarding the informal economy. So I just wanted to understand a lot of this automobile are being repaired by the roadside mechanic. With the government pushing more on electric vehicles, and with the growth of electric vehicles, the parts are about to come down, and the roadside mechanic does not get an formal training from any of the auto manufacturers. So just wanted to understand, with the E part pushing forward, how would the growth of this informal economy would take place?
Yeah, I think if I extend the question, many times in a social impact, we take one action, assuming we are achieving one goal,
and we score certain other own goals, self goals, because we don't foresee how the impact is going to, create from that action. So there's unintended consequences along with intended consequences. So how you really look after this issue, and which would become very, very complicated with so many things are on a boiling span right now. So yeah.
So if I were to take a slightly humorous take at the beginning and then perhaps a more serious take, so I think we humans are expert in trying to solve a problem by creating another problem. For example, if the whole push of EV is to get rid of the polluting diesel and petrol vehicles, but it's not as if EV is completely clean. Because to charge that electricity, you would need some electricity which in India predominantly comes from thermal. The other part is lithium. To mine lithium, which goes into making EV, batteries of EV, is amongst the most, if not the most, water-intensive process. And God forbid if India tries to mine all the lithium reserves in Kashmir, which the estimates suggest the viable part is less, it would demand a humongous quantity of water. So what happens to that water part? Finally, when batteries, they meet the end of life after 6, 7, 8 years, do we have the infrastructure to manage those e-waste? So other set of problems that India is postponing for 2030, India will soon need to, has started taking steps, but India will need to take step on that. But for a best part of managing those e-waste, you will need to engage with the informal economy. And from my limited interaction, formal corporates don't want to directly engage with the informal sector because they believe these are outside. In the waste management sector, the best estimates suggest 90% of our waste is managed by the informal sector. Now, some of the people I have talked to, they think India will become a Europe in some time, and these people will simply disappear. But the informal sector, the contribution in terms of people it employs, how much it contributes to economy, little effort has gone into formal sector actually trying to go and make them as a part of this thing. I'll end it here and probably let Samit and others jump in.
I'll just add. It's a very interesting question, so I can't stop answering. Who is deciding the agenda? Very important. Is economy deciding agenda or environment? Today, MNCs are deciding agenda. You take this, you buy that. Not only car, huge consumerism. In fact, irresponsible consumerism is the heart of much of the problems. You don't need something, but you are asked to buy that, by so many, the cola culture, by aggressive marketing, you can sell cola. Similarly, aggressive marketing is absolutely, sorry, there are many marketing people here, but what are you doing ultimately? You are damaging much of the thing. Therefore, why should you have more cars? I think if environment were to decide, there is no more carbon intensity economy. It's all, EV is only a disguise of a new form of pollution. The environment doesn't like it, and you are giving it a low value. Economy must decide everything, because they have more money, they have more profits. So I think we have to accept the role of economy versus environment.
Thank you.
Just quickly to add, not so on EVs, enough has been said, but I think there are, to your broader questions, right? One, doing a clear and more detailed assessment of the several impacts of your action, right? And there is only so much right? I think the other is being nimble, right? This environment requires us to watch what's the impact of our actions. And that's why I said the board should be meeting the stakeholders and figuring out what's happening now. We speak about Tatas, and they are, from very early days, they've been, practicing corporate social responsibility. But I'm sure some of their actions also, didn't pan out the way they were planning, right? So even with best intentions, which are not always there, I'll admit, things can go wrong. So how do you sense what's happening, and how do you have this humility to change, right? I think what money brings in, which I didn't say, the disparities and the inequities, it brings in hubris. And we've seen that. I'll just share two examples where people forget deciding what money can do, think they can decide who should be governing other countries. So we've heard about George Soros recently, and we've seen how billions of dollars have been put into Twitter just to kill the platform, right? So I think we need to move away from that hubris, saying that we know the answers, and be open to make the fact that we will make mistakes, we will correct them.
Okay, I think,
And just a note of disclaimer, I am not anti-EV. So please don't construe my examples of EVs as that I am anti-EV.
No. I think, so I think none of us have a complete broader understanding what is going to be the longer impact, and I think the point that let be authentic, let do the rigorous study, then a bounded rationality, make a choices, and then be humble to kind of change our choices. Some more questions we have from anyone. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting topic. So really from SDG to ESG to direction setting, why always the governance? So we had already discussed about the stakeholder engagement, and we discussed like students have started asking questions, and when they are getting exposed to maybe rural immersion. When the experience says if we go and see how jeans is getting manufactured, so the kind of water we are consuming for manufacturing the cloth, that piece, then we probably we'll think twice when we are going to wear that jeans. So I'm just thinking, like we are in an educational institute, management institute, why not it can be in a reverse way? So like stakeholders, like students or maybe the prospective employees are asking, whether this is a product that is coming from responsible production, or maybe we are consuming whether it is responsible. We are going to stay in a place whether we are going to have clean air, or maybe the consumers are asking the questions. Can we not go into the reverse way rather than only direction or going the compliance centric, what Kalyan had mentioned, if how much percentage of ESG courses are being taught, or when there is accreditation we are going ahead, or maybe the BRSR, the compliance perspective. So this is what the thought process that I would like to hear from you.
Can I respond? Very good question. In fact, I'm happy that generally our business schools are becoming very conscious about these aspects, and the curriculum, particularly for the National Education Policy 2020, curriculum is having lot of content of on these lines. But what is more important, the schools, it must begin from school level, not just the IIMs or universities, but school. They are the real places, because many of the future citizens will leave. 30%, 40% is the rate at which they will come to higher education. So 40-50% will leave. Therefore, school is the place to catch them young. So both, of course, certainly IIMs, institutions must teach, but school level, the process must begin.
Yeah, and just to add on to Professor Rath, I think, so when we teach students in a management education, the intent is we can bring in some behavioral changes in the short to medium and long term, which can drive a multiple changes. But as Soumit had mentioned, the idea of unlearning and relearning. Now, unlearning is pretty difficult. If in my 21, 22 years before I set my foot in a management education, I have learned that this is a traditional model and this is how things ought to work. For me to attempt to make the students unlearn that is pretty difficult in a 18 months MBA course. So that's one limitation. The other side, again, on a more of a humor note, that example that I take up, few years in 2019, I think, in IIM Bangalore, some professors, one of the professor and some students said that we have to set the tone, we have to drive the action because corporations are not driving the actions on their own. And then they said, Hindustan Unilever had a factory in Kodaikanal which had not yet been cleaned of the mercury poisoning, and let us send a message to the recruiter and debar them from placements till the time they clean up this mess. Now that created another set of controversy in IIM Bangalore and in the larger management education, that what is the role the management education institutes see themselves playing in this part. So are they following what's happening, or can they drive the agenda? So again, it's a contentious topic in a B schools.
I mean, I didn't know about this, but just to, I think, couple of things. One, from the time when I did MBA, I studied mostly in class, right? Because there was no other modes. Now there's just so much information available to young minds that, I mean, I would say we should spark curiosity and, and be open to all kinds of questions. On the specific thing about HUL, I would say, if you look at from a sustainability perspective, Paul Pullman, the Unilever PLC head, has done the most. In fact, he stopped giving quarterly guidance to stock markets because that was driving behavior. Now there may be, of course, the arsenic or whatever mercury poisoning happened. My view, honestly, is MBA institutes or education institutes should not be activists, right? What you have to, you are basically teaching your students to do conflict management and conflict resolution, sit and find a solution rather than being activists. So, but I leave it there.
So, again, on this note, the same professor who asked IIM Bangalore director and the students to debar HUL, I had an opportunity to engage with him in 2019. And then again, this conversation. So, do you see your role as a preacher or do you see your role as a teacher? So that, are we Asaram Bapu or are we teachers in our part? So again, this is where the fine line. And there are professors today in Indian management institutes who align more on the preacher side, some who see themselves rolling as the teacher side. But the more and more students that we are seeing want immediate action. And sometimes they pose these uncomfortable questions for us to grapple with.
Thank you, Kalyan. I think that was a nice way to bring, to a kind of interesting point to the discussion. I think Professor Rajesh Jain is sitting here and he has shared with me the list that our panel discussions are starting at 5:15 track discussions, and many research presenters are online already joined. So he has asked me to kind of conclude this interesting discussion, but I would request all of you to join panelists in a very informal discussion post this kind of a conclusion. I would say that through a discussion, what I can understand is that this journey of social impact is like going to a Manali in a night trek where that direction is this, that we want to have a prosperous, wealthy, kind of a sustainable planet. But what we right now know is only to have a torch in hand and we can walk a certain distance. Really don't know what is going to be the direction to reach that top. And the good part is that we know that there are ESGs and SDGs and we know the final destination, but we also know that we have this education of commitment and compliance going on, giving us a torchlight and moving forward. Probably we need to be authentic and humble in the way we, take society and business together. So with that, I would like to kind of express a deep gratitude from IIM Ranchi to all panelists by giving one small token of gratitude, so that they'd have a big round of applause to the panelists. I think it was extremely engaging discussion in a very short time frame. Yeah. This is a small token of grief. Thank you. Thank you. So I request all of you to hold the speakers and have some.
Thank you. Thank you. Kalyan. Thank you, Gaurav.
Parallel track sessions have been scheduled in the academic block, and everybody is requested to come back here at 7:30 for the cultural programs. Thank you.
Started, I think they got late, so everybody coming in was